You're listening to the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. Now here's your hosts, Kevin, Derek, and Alex.
Alrighty, welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. I am Derek, and I am joined, as always, by your co-hosts, Kevin and Alex. Guys, how we doing tonight?
I'm still cracking up from how we ended last week. If you weren't here for that one, Derek was having some computer problems. Just the intro there just made me start thinking about it and laughing. Derek was having some computer problems, and before we could end the show last week, he got booted out of the room. So Kevin and I were just sitting there trying to figure out what the hell we were doing. Sorry, Kevin, go ahead.
No, it's all good, man. We're doing good. We're starting to get some interesting news and notes coming from the NFL. Some of it's around workouts. Some of it's around players signing their rookie deals. Some of it's around players still wanting out of their current situations. But it's news, right? It's stuff that we can gravitate to, that we can opinionate on, and quite frankly, that helps make it interesting. That's why the NFL is the beast that never sleeps, and I love it. I just can't get enough, and you know, anytime I can see some clickbait on the NFL, I'm that guy. I will go click on it and read whatever it is.
Yeah, there's been plenty of it over the last 7 days even. Yeah, it's been nice. We're dealing with just like a ton of rain where I am here in Central Texas. It's been raining off and on for the last 5 days. I don't know if you guys watched the FCS championship game on Sunday. This past Sunday, Sam Houston State and South Dakota State. There was spring football for anybody. That wasn't the spring league, which I think they're trying to get going again. But that was played in a deluge, I believe is the proper term. And it was bad football because of that. And then they straightened some things out, and it was an exciting finish. So it was fun to see some college football wrapping up the spring FCS season, and let's hope to God we never have to see a spring football season like that ever again, and we can just keep playing in the fall like we always do.
Have you been getting that hail, that baseball-sized hail that's down there, or is that north of you?
It's been missing us, thank God. I don't have my car. I don't have anything to park my car under where I live. So when – I'm not going to say if, because I do believe it is a when. When that hits, my comprehensive coverage that I just signed up for will come in handy.
Attaboy.
All righty. Well, guys, we do have a great show for you. A lot of fun coming on. Make sure wherever you're listening, watching this, make sure you're clicking that follow, that subscribe button. You know, hit us up on all the socials. But, guys, we do have a very special guest joining us tonight, and that's Coach Steve from the Fantasy Coaches. Steve, how you doing?
Man, I'm good, man. I'm glad to be back on the show with you guys. I feel like it's been a while. I mean, we talked on the NFL draft a little bit. It was cool, but it's been a while since we got to all talking, talk some fantasy. You know, it's a little late on my end over here, but I got my tea, a little Miami Dolphins, a little foreshadowing of what's going to be happening tonight. But I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. Well, Steve, you mentioned it already that you were on here last year helping us break down a team, and you're back to do the same this year. And this is your team here with the Miami Dolphins. But, since we've talked last year, what have you guys been up to over there at the Fantasy Coaches?
We're continuing to grow. We got a bunch of new writers on over the last year, and they've been great. We're planning on doing a couple new things this year. We're hoping to do sort of a charity league of our own at some point this year that we're hoping to start up. We're obviously live now. This time last year, we weren't live. We weren't doing these podcasts live. You couldn't see this face or my co-host Jibs' face or anything. And now we're doing it live if you guys happen to ever check us out. And, we're just continuing to just try to provide everyone as much as possible good fantasy content and help them get fantasy championships.
Absolutely. So now that it is post-NFL draft, and we start getting into the mock drafts, the best ball drafts, the rookie drafts and dynasty formats, all the drafting that you can, get your hands on at the moment. Like, what do you like to draft most? Is it dynasty? Is it redraft? Is it best ball? Like, what's your cup of tea here?
You know what? I love a good old school redraft league. especially when you get to be with a bunch of people, live in person. Those are probably the best to me, honestly. Getting together, we do one right before Labor Day every year with a bunch of my buddies from college, and it's a great experience to get the draft board, throw your sticker on there, and everyone, whoever the championship is, they love that trophy around, just mocking everyone. I mean, that is just good old times, honestly. I prefer that. But obviously, I do my dynasty leagues, and I'm pretty sure the day after the draft ended, all the ones that I commissioned, I think you guys might be in one of them. You guys are, actually. I think I started that rookie draft the day after. I said, let's get going, guys. I want to see some rookies going. But redraft is a classic to me.
Absolutely. That's it's my tried and true, right? It's the league that the three of us are in, along with some high school and college buddies, and I can agree with you there. Like, it's super fun. The only thing that we struggle with now is everyone's so damn spread out in our league. Like, we have guys, you were in North Dakota, and now you're in Texas, and then we have one in Louisiana, and then we have some up over in West Colorado, up over the mountains, and then some here where we're at. Like, it's just so stinking spread out, and it's about the time we start doing a destination draft. At one point, I'd like to be able to do that and have a little fun over Labor Day weekend.
That would be a good time. Yeah, we've never done the draft board though. We've always been either analog.
We did. It was the year before you started, Derek.
Oh,
I think you were there when we did the draft board. It was terrible.
Yep.
Like,
yes,
it was not even like Hooters efficient. Like, it was just god awful terrible. So thank God for the ESPN app at the time, right? That just gave us the draft board and we went with it.
Yeah, we've done the analog a couple times. I remember doing the analog, and those drafts they took forever because it's always somebody wasn't paying attention and missed the last 4 picks, and then they're calling out the last 4 guys as if they can try and get them on their roster. Those are always the fun times, but yeah, to be as spread out as we are with everybody, definitely getting together with your buddies. That's what fantasy football is all about. You get together with your buddies. I think that's how we all kind of got our start in this crazy, what has turned into an obsession for some folks. But that's where we're all at. So Steve, I know we're going to talk about the Dolphins, but I got to get your pulse on what are things like down there, because it's been rough times, but there has to feel like there's some promise for the Miami Dolphins faithful.
Yeah, I mean, there's optimism for sure right now. Obviously, either you like Tua, you don't like Tua. That's kind of what it is right now. I'm still on that side there as a Dolphins fan. I think what he showed us last year wasn't his full potential, and I think giving him that offseason to get another year outside that injury, I think will really get him to the next level. So there's optimism that Tua can do it. This team is built right now. Our head coach, I mean, he's just a good guy. I mean, he brought in like 70 rookies into his mini camp just to teach them everything about the NFL. I mean, what kind of coach does that on a consistent basis? I mean, he's building this team the right way, a winning culture, not even a winning culture, just I want to play football and I want to work hard kind of culture, not just, they're all about winning, which they are. That's what they're trying to do, obviously, as an NFL football team. But they're just kind of bringing that, let's do everything right. Let's work by the books, and let's not, do what everyone thinks we're supposed to do, like draft a running back. Let's do what we want to do and do it right. And they've been doing it so far. I mean, with the draft selections, collecting the picks, just relying on the players that they want to bring into that camp there. It's really fun that, as a Dolphins fan right now, to have some hope again after last couple of seasons of some poor years, or at least the last decade or two, if you want to go back even farther. So it's really nice right now.
Doesn't it sound like us in 2011, guys?
No,
you either like the quarterback or you don't like the quarterback, but dang if it isn't fun to be a fan again of the Denver Broncos.
No, but really, I'd agree with everything you said. I like Flores a lot. I agree. Even from Denver, just kind of, trying to keep a finger on the pulse, right? Obviously, not being down in South Beach, I don't, get all the beat writers and everything else, but it just seems like the players are buying in. It seems like the organization and the coaching staff are all saying and doing the right things at the moment. And really, to this point of his coaching tenure, it really seems like Flores has been the most successful of implementing the Patriot way that everybody in the media likes to talk about. But it seems like he's been the most successful of bringing that to his new team and implementing a culture of, we want to be here, this is what's expected, and once we build this, we're going to go out and we're going to put some wins on the board here, and we're going to make hell for the rest of the AFC East.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Steve, real quick, how can the listeners connect with you over there at the Fantasy Coaches?
Yeah, so you could definitely go follow us on Twitter or Instagram at the Fantasy Coaches. If you ever want to connect with me personally, any fantasy questions, just to talk about fantasy or whatever it may be, mine's here on the screen, or it's at Coach Stephen P on Twitter as well.
Very cool. Very, very cool. So let's go ahead and, unless you guys have some other questions there.
Well, let's jump into what we came here for.
All right, let's go ahead and talk some Miami Dolphins, especially talking fantasy football for this coming year. Now, we'll start where we always do, and that's with the running back room. And the running back room featuring a couple of guys that I don't know that there was a ton of believers out there thinking that they wouldn't go into draft week and not come out with another running back, but they did, kind of leaving Myles Gaskin as the front runner there, who finished as running back 27 last year, 142 rush attempts, 584 yards, 3 rushing touchdowns, 41 receptions on 47 targets, 388 through the air with an additional 2 touchdowns through the air. Guys, your thoughts on Myles Gaskin?
I think Myles Gaskin is a solid. I think he gets back into RB2 territory, right? He was dinged up a little bit where Salvon Ahmed he filled in for him very, very nicely, really. But I think they're going to try and lean a little bit of that 1-2 punch, but Gaskin's definitely going to be the 1A back here. He showed some elusiveness. He showed a good burst to him. Had a nose for the end zone. He was really good at grinding out some of those tough yards when the Dolphins needed to get a first down or needed, to keep that clock going. Myles Gaskin did a very good job, and I was one of the doubters. I'll put my hand in the air and own that. And he absolutely proved me wrong for last year. And while he's not, Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry, there's not many Dalvin Cook or Derrick Henrys. Like, he's a very serviceable NFL back. And for what the Dolphins are trying to implement and do, I think he fits in very nicely. And for running back, if I'm saying he's going to finish as a running back 2, so 22, 23 is I think where I have him without looking real quick. You can get him at a value still because everybody's kind of like, oh, well, we don't know what's going on. So you can get Gaskin towards the end as like almost a 4th running back, depending on what you're doing in the draft. And he's a guy that you can easily plug in there as your flex play or your second running back on bye weeks. And you're super happy with that, guys. Like, I like Myles Gaskin a lot. He is a guy that I'm going to be following.
Yeah, he's definitely somebody who I honestly, as a Dolphins fan, obviously I knew a lot of the players that they drafted in there, and he was basically just like a poor man's cousins of Jonathan Taylor's. He's very successful in college. He had a lot of miles racked up. I just never thought he would actually see the starting workload, and obviously he did it this season, and he showed flashes there for sure. I mean, he was first in the league in yards per reception among running backs. He was someone who averaged 16.4 fantasy points a game when he was actually on the field. And again, that was the issue. He had a little bit of injuries during the season that kind of like had him in and out of the lineups. But it's definitely interesting, and he's definitely somebody this coming season who I'm intrigued with as a solid, possible RB3, RB4, like Kevin just said here, in a lot of redrafts. In terms of a dynasty, I'd probably want to sell him now. I think this is the perfect chance. I don't think he's going to be our long-term answer. I think he has that 2021 great value to him. I don't also think that he's going to be by himself this season here, too. I don't know if we're going to get to those guys. I think we are. I'll wait until we get there. But I think he's a solid player, and he's going to provide solid value. But I think there's some other guys there who might also steal work from him. But he definitely provides a possible RB3 value going into the season at the moment.
So yeah, here's the issue that I have with Myles Gaskin, and it's I think for a lot of people, especially when you're in a running back room and you're not the Dalvin Cooks, the Derrick Henrys of the world, that your best ability is availability, right? And that is something that we have yet to really see from Myles Gaskin. Now I know he had the 10 games last year, and there was the MCL sprain. There was the COVID list where he missed a couple games. But, I mean, he's played in 17 games in 2 years. And he's played one full season in 2 years. So you'd like to see that number, a little bit more consistency, right? If that's where we're gonna put him in that RB2 category, firmly in that RB2 category, he's going to have to be on the field a little bit more. And, Steve, to your point, he's going to have to get lucky and not be siphoned off of by some of these other cats that are in the running back room. So I like the idea of Myles Gaskin being a running back too. I really do. Whether or not that actually happens is going to be dependent upon, can he stay healthy and stay on the field? And will these other guys take some of the load from him? When he's been healthy, he's been a very efficient back and a very helpful back. You'd like to see those touchdown numbers go up a little bit more than what he had last year. But those could come with a quarterback like Tua. You feel like maybe those would also get poached from a Gaskin type. But we'll get to Tua in a little bit. But those are the two big red flags that I see from Myles Gaskin. And while they aren't big enough to scare me away from him, because I was on him last year, I was kind of forced into using him, and he was beneficial. It's just he was only beneficial for half the season, and that's kind of frustrating as a fantasy owner.
So I think this might be where you and I differ a little bit, Alex, is because I don't give really a rip of what carries he gives up. He's the only guy in that backfield who's really going to be receiving the football, and he is a great receiving running back. And so that's where you're making your hay, right? Like, I don't expect him to, get the ball in his stomach 18 to 20 times a game and run between the tackles. But I do expect him to see, 4 to 7 targets a game and come down with 3 to 5 catches week in and week out. So, while, yes, you need to be available to do that, where he gets his run in especially PPR leagues is where he's very enticing, is because he's the only back on that team who has good soft hands. It's not Malcolm Brown. Ahmed can a little bit, but he's not nearly as efficient as Myles Gaskin was. So that's where I'm looking for him is I want him as a producer, as that really good receiving back who also gets, at least 12 to 15 touches running the ball a game too. So that's why I'm enticed with it, right? Is it's that consistent, you're getting 18 touches a game between running and receiving, and I'm okay with that. As a third running back, kind of where Steve and I were talking, guys, that's gold right there for a third running back. You gotta love it.
Yeah, and he's a guy that you could even potentially put on there as a fourth RB, just depending upon how you draft and you go into that strategy. But you're looking at it, he was very efficient, like you already mentioned, hit over just 4 yards a clip every time that he ran the ball on average, right? And we're talking about siphoning some things away and things like that. Like, yeah, I don't know that you really, even if he gets siphoned off, that he's going to see a dip in the overall touches that he sees. 142 rush attempts for a running back, especially the RB1 in a situation, is really not many. There's some backups out there that see roughly about that same carry load to it. So the fact that he was able to put up an RB27 on the year last year and miss 6 games, like, he's a guy that I would be very willing to target, especially being that third, fourth running back on the roster, and a guy that you're not going to have to spend much draft capital on to get when you're talking about an RB that could potentially finish in RB2 territory. More often than not, those are RBs you're having to draft in the 3rd round or higher to get that type of production. And he's a guy that you can typically pick up 5th, 6th, 7th round, somewhere in there. So the value is certainly there. And the value is what I'm going to be looking at when it comes draft season. So I'm certainly in on Myles Gaskin, especially where his value is going to be this year. So we've talked about Malcolm Brown a little bit already, but Malcolm Brown a new Dolphin over this offseason, coming over from the Rams where he finished as running back 42 last year, 101 rush attempts, 419 yards, 5 rushing touchdowns, 23 receptions on 33 targets for 162 through the air. Your thoughts on Malcolm Brown?
Short yardage and goal line hawk. Like, he's going to be the guy who's going to steal some of these touchdowns. He's going to be the guy that they bring in to save Tua's body a little bit, right? And not that Tua's injury prone, right? He had a freak hip injury, and they're working through that. But let's not have our quarterback take unnecessary hits as he's developing and learning and growing into the NFL. Let's bring in this running back who is a very efficient short yardage back. And when we're inside the 5, it's, the run game will go through Malcolm Brown. If it's 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, it's going to be Malcolm Brown who's getting that football. So week in and week out, I don't see him being very productive. Like, he's not a guy I seek after in the draft. If you're in a touchdown only league, he might, if those are still around. I haven't played in a touchdown only league in probably 12 years, guys, but I'm sure there's people who do. So if you're playing in a touchdown only league, like, he's a guy that I'm targeting late just on a flyer. I mean, heck, you never know, right? The Dolphins might be extremely efficient in the red zone, and a large part of it might be because of Malcolm Brown. So that's where I see him, but I'm not picking him up to even mess around that in dynasty or redraft leagues on any consistent basis. I can find value other places.
To add to your point, Kevin, last year, as a member of the Rams, he carried the ball 101 times, as Derek said. 25 of those were for first downs. He only had 419 yards on the ground. The guy is a short yardage fiend. He had 5 touchdowns too. Like, I mean, you're talking about a guy that will be useful in short yardage situations. For fantasy purposes, that's not exactly, you are reliant upon the team getting into those situations, which doesn't always happen. So he is a high risk, but can be a high reward if you want to put him in your lineup, if he happens to get into the end zone. But those are risks. They are risks that you're going to have to take if you want to put him on your roster. For me, that's not a risk I'm willing to take. I'd rather go with somebody who's got a little bit more consistency. But to your point, Kevin, there are formats out there for a Malcolm Brown. Regular old fantasy football is not one of them.
It's definitely not, that's for sure. He definitely should be on your dynasty rosters if he's out there. I mean, there's a chance that he's a starting running back week 1. There's a chance. They went out there and they signed him very quickly in the free agency. They had to have had somewhat of a plan to bring a guy like Malcolm Brown. He is the veteran on the team per se. The thing is about him is he's not going to be fantasy relevant, but he's going to ruin the value slightly of a guy like Myles Gaskin. That's how I feel about Malcolm Brown. He's going to see similar to what he did this past season here, where he's going to possibly steal that goal line work from Gaskins, and then that lowers Gaskin's value slightly. And while Gaskin is probably the better pass catcher, Malcolm Brown this past season had his highest total ever as a receiving back, like 33 targets, I believe it was this season here. I think he was like at the single digits prior to this couple seasons here. So possibly he sees some work because of that recent uptake. Maybe he learned how to catch the ball better. That's the only thing I can see about Malcolm Brown. He's not a guy you're going to want in fantasy, but he's a guy who's might prevent Myles Gaskin from really seeing that RB2 value.
Yeah. Tell me that Malcolm Brown isn't the Jordan Howard of 2021 here. Like, that's really how I see this one playing out, that they kind of brought him in, and you look back to Jordan Howard last year on the Miami Dolphins, was a guy that came in and would have 1 touch for 1 yard and a touchdown type of thing. Like, he was a guy that was going to just come in and be a short yardage guy to power the ball through and get a touchdown. And I don't really see Malcolm Brown doing much more than that for this roster. Bring him in and just be that short yardage goal line. We need 2-3 yards. Go out there and send this big body guy to thump it on through. But that's kind of how I see it. I think you're right. I don't think he's going to have any fantasy relevance, but I think he's going to cannibalize a little bit into a guy like Myles Gaskin.
Yeah, I think matchup dependent. He's a guy that you want to keep an eye on for DFS, right? He will sneak in a game or two this season with a couple touchdowns. His value for DFS is going to be dirt cheap. So obviously, if that's your niche, right, and if that's something that you're into and that you participate in, Malcolm Brown's a guy that, depending on the matchup, you could hey, save some money here, pay up at wide receiver. If you really want Travis Kelce one week, well, one way to pay up for Travis Kelce is to pay down at one of your running back spots. And if the matchup is nice, Malcolm Brown could be an option there. Not consistent, matchup dependent, but nonetheless, like Alex said, he does have value in some formats, and that would be where you look for it.
I will add another thing. Last year, obviously, contract year with the Rams, it was the second of 2 years, the 2-year deal that he signed with the Rams. This year, just a 1-year deal in Miami, so another contract year. We saw what his contract year was last year. I kind of like those guys that have something to prove. They usually play with a little bit more of an edge. But again, I'm not sure what Miami sees usage-wise out of him, but if it's anything like it was last year, the fantasy consistency will be very, very tough.
Yes, you are correct. And they do have another running back in that room as well. Salvon Ahmed finished as running back 64 last year, 75 rush attempts, 319 yards, 3 rushing touchdowns, 11 receptions on 14 targets for 61 through the air. Any thoughts on Salvon Ahmed?
This is the guy that I'm picking up late as just a depth piece. I think he will see he'll see a little bit more run. Like I said earlier with Gaskin is not the workhorse. They have other mouths to feed, but Ahmed, in my opinion, is that second option. Slight change of pace, but can help lighten some of the running workload off of Gaskin and keep Gaskin available deeper into the season. So in case of, right, I'm not going to say he's a handcuff. I'm not drafting him as a handcuff, but I am drafting him as a young depth piece. He's only coming into his second year. So there's a lot of tread still on his tires. We're not quite sure how this is going to work out. And if you're able to pick someone up like that in the, 16th, 17th round, well, everybody likes running back depth. So why the heck not put it in a situation where I know he's going to at least see some run. And if Gaskin goes down, there's a better than likely chance that he will then step into that lead back role and Malcolm Brown's role will stay the same. That might change once we get into week 1 and we see what the Dolphins are doing. But as of today, that's how I see it, at least.
What's intriguing about Ahmed is really it was the 2 games last year, and the only reason that he had those 2 games was because Gaskin was out of the lineup. He took his opportunity. He made the most of that opportunity, but it was just the 2 games where he got kind of the bell cow work, if you will, and really that game against New England there in week 14, or I should say game 14. I don't know what week was that, week 15. He kind of burst onto the scene with a 122-yard performance and a touchdown. So that's intriguing. You can see that the talent is there. I want to go back to kind of the conversations we were having this time last year about rookies. And you guys will remember this, Kevin and Derek, that we were all saying, I don't know about these rookies. I fade the rookies because they're not going to have the benefit of OTAs, of a rookie mini camp, of OTAs, of training camp, or a full training camp situation, of a preseason. Their first snaps were real snaps. They weren't just for pretend ball. that you can try and figure out what the NFL game is like. So I'll give a little leeway to some of these rookies because they didn't have those opportunities last year, and they were kind of learning on the job and having to do stuff that no rookies had to do in a long time in the NFL. So you can see that there are flashes there. But again, I like what you're saying, Kevin, in terms of what his usage would be. And that is more in the role of, or how I see it at least, is more in the role of a Gaskins like versus a Malcolm Brown like. You know, that usage will be more in line with what they're going to do with Myles Gaskin than what they're going to do with Malcolm Brown. So if you do have Gaskin, probably a good idea. If you want to have a piece of this running back room and you feel like that's going to be worth your while, then yeah, you pick him up. Otherwise, we're gonna have to see, kind of what the splits are early on here, and the reports coming out of Miami, because he really depends on, will he get the opportunity, and if Gaskin is there to limit that opportunity, then his value plummets.
Yeah, Alex, I actually agree a lot with you. It's basically just a replacement for Gaskins for me right now when it comes to Ahmed. Again, when he saw the opportunity, he was great. He showed flashes, and it was really good to see. But in terms of, if you think of him right now in Dynasty, yeah, he's definitely a guy, if you could put on your taxi squad and see can he beat out Gaskins or Brown during the training camp? It's possible. Why not? I mean, I think that backfield is wide open. If someone just shows up during training camp, and it could be Ahmed. But honestly, it's probably likely he's going to see the third string role, and if Gaskins were to go down, Ahmed just kind of slips in there and takes over that role, and him and Brown will then share the carries more than likely. But he's a good pickup just to have on, I guess, like a bench guy or a taxi squad guy right now. But I don't see him being a big, impactful player unless someone gets hurt.
Yeah, I think I am fully aboard on what everybody has said there. And we'll go ahead and move on over to some wide receivers then. Devante Parker had a little bit of a letdown after his 2019 season and finishes wide receiver 42 last year, 63 receptions, 103 targets, 793 and 4 through the air. What are your thoughts on Devante Parker?
Was it a letdown or was it a quarterback change? Was that? I mean, again, you're only as good as the guy throwing the ball to you, but certainly those numbers were disappointing. He was pretty much at his catch total from the previous year. He was down 10 catches from the previous year, but the yardage was way down. I mean, he was 9 catches shy of what he did in 2019, but he was 400 yards shy of what he did yardage wise. And then those touchdowns were cut in half, 9-4. So yeah, that is disappointing, but he did have a quarterback change halfway through the season, and it takes time to develop that. Again, a rookie who didn't have the advantage of OTAs and minicamp and full training camp and a preseason to get some of those reps. It was on the job learning. So you'd like to see those numbers kind of rebound, but Tua is not Ryan Fitzpatrick, and that you're not going to have that gunslinger mentality out of Tua Tagovailoa. So you take it with a grain of salt, because you've got to figure out how is Tua going to target Devante Parker? Will he, be the guy that gets you 400 more yards on 9 more catches?
Yeah, I think Parker was one of the guys, if I'm not mistaken, that we did say kind of pump the brakes on coming into the 2020 season. 2019 was great, and if you got Parker late, because up until that point he had kind of been a borderline bust, if not a complete bust to that point, and he finally broke out to the guy a lot of us thought he would be. So he definitely showed those flashes. It helps that he is the big-bodied receiver on that team, right? At 6'3", he is the guy that goes up to high point the ball. He still does a good job using his body to keep the defender away, moving the chains. I think the Dolphins in drafting Jaylen Waddle kind of have a different deep threat now that maybe Parker's not. So, and that's okay because I think Parker truly fits into that intermediate route combination a little bit better. I don't think of him as a deep ball specialist, but I do think of him as a guy that can get, 12 to 15 yards down the field, create a little bit of separation, and then use that big body to come down with it. That being said, I still have him in wide receiver 3 territory. I do think he improves off of last year's numbers, but he does fall short of 2019. So somewhere in that range of, wide receiver 40, I believe is probably where he's going to shake out. And I think part of that might just be systematically in Miami. And I do think part of it is I want to see Tua be able to drop back and play the full game without getting yanked for the backup and everything else, and give him the chance to sling it, 30, 35 times a game. And let's really see what he's learned over the offseason, because if Tua has taken that step into year 2, that will drastically increase the output of Devante Parker.
Yeah, and with Devonta Parker, I've watched him. I've so hyped when they draft him, and then it's been disappointment. And I think you see what Devonta Parker really is. I think 2019 was somewhat of a fluke season, and not fluke that is of his talent. I think he has the talent. It's about his availability on the field, and that was always his niche. He was always injured. He always had something nagging him that kept him off the field for multiple games throughout seasons, or kept him out of a whole game. And that's what you saw this past season. He just missed games. He was banged up a lot, and he just never got on the field enough to have that connection with a guy like Tua right now. And, he had that last year with Fitzpatrick. So the 2 games that Fitzpatrick and him played together, that was a full game at least, he had over 100 yards. He was great. But I'm seeing him more of a wide receiver 3 value myself as well, Kevin. I can't see him going any higher. I don't see the upside of him anymore. Even with a guy like Tua, I think they're moving their offense, and you saw this season with more speed, more of those dump-off passes, and let the wide receivers do what they do best and get downfield based off their speed here. I think Parker will find himself a decent role, and I think you could see similar numbers to what you saw this past season here, because I think Tua has that ability to throw downfield that many people kind of knacked him for this coming season. But I just don't see that ceiling anymore with him. He's a little bit older now. The injuries have to be somewhat of a concern each season moving forward now at this point, but again, he's talented. He's just more of a wide receiver 3 at best right now.
Gotcha. What was the phrase from last week? He's not injury prone. He's health resistant.
Health resistant. Yeah.
So
Nice
I think that's probably a nice way to sum that one up. And you're right. He did play a little banged up there, but even when you look at it from when he had Fitzpatrick, because they made that switch over to where Tua was going to be the starter, right? Coming off that bye week. So we had about 5-6 weeks of Fitzpatrick being the starter. The best week that we saw out of him was wide receiver 14 on that week, where he posted 10 receptions for 110 yards, but no other no other game where he really kind of shined and popped like he did from 2019 either. And he had just as many games with Tua in there where he finished in that wide receiver 2 territory. There was a lot of weeks when if you drafted him last year, you had to have drafted him as the wide receiver 25 overall, roughly ADP of 58. So when a guy that you draft that high, because if you're drafting him that high, you're drafting him typically to be the wide receiver 2 on your team, maybe wide receiver 3 based on where you are. But where you drafted him last year, you were not happy with the outcome and the performance of that one, because you were having to spend up into a 5th round type of pick for that, and definitely didn't hit. I think you'll see him drop a little bit, but you're probably looking at maybe a wide, ADP in the 7th round, maybe. And even at that point, I don't know that I'm really willing to spend up on a 7th rounder to take Devonta Parker, because like Steve already said, I don't see the upside. I don't see the big ceiling there. And that's, if I'm drafting in the 7th round, I'm taking a player with upside, because I've already built my team around the fact that I've got the floor established, and I'm taking swings and trying to get that upside there. And for those reasons, Devonta Parker will most likely not be on my fantasy rosters this coming season. So Will Fuller just came over from the Texans, and he'll be missing the first game of this season. He had finished as wide receiver 28, even missing the last 5 weeks of the year. 53 receptions, 75 targets for 879 through the air with 8 receiving touchdowns. Guys, your thoughts on Will Fuller, the fifth?
Over under number of games that Will Fuller appears in this year, I will put the hard line at 11.
Over.
Yeah, over.
Oh, wow.
I'm projecting 12 to 13. That's how I'm going to stat that out. They've got an extra game on the season.
So
That's
Fuller,
true.
Yeah.
Fuller picked a great time to have a career year, right? He had a contract year, was a clear wide receiver one up until Brian Cushing got into the locker room and infected some of the Texans with not so nice things. This speaks to the Texans organization. You bring a guy with a PED history in with access to players to give them PEDs, but I digress. Will Fuller, there was a lot of rumblings about him coming into last year, and let's not forget the games he missed last year was suspended, not health concerned. And coming up into the 2020 season, the big Will Fuller comparison for the points in that they were at in their career was Keenan Allen. I still think that comparison holds true, guys. Like Will Fuller is the clear alpha dog on this team as far as receiver goes. He showed that he can stay physically healthy and put up big numbers while doing it. The thing that is interesting to me is Will Fuller is a guy that creates separation 20 plus yards down the field. He's a guy that you typically have to have 5 to 7 step drops and allow the quarterback some time to throw the ball deep, let Fuller do his thing as he's getting either behind the corner or if he's splitting the corner in safety, just depending on what he's kind of doing, and then let him go. I'm very interested to see how the Dolphins are going to use him because I like Will Fuller this season. I saw enough out of him last year that I can go buy some Will Fuller and I'll be happy with it in redraft leagues. My one concern or question is, how are they really going to use him? Because Tua's just not the same quarterback as Deshaun Watson. The Dolphins are not the same offensive football team that the Houston Texans are, right? Like, just the little intricacies that change from team to team. I'm going to take a couple chances on Will Fuller across some leagues. I'm definitely not searching after him in all leagues, but I do want shares of him because I think that he is I think he's going to be the clear alpha on this team. It's just a matter of how can they find creative ways to continue to get him the ball, because this kid has a nose for the end zone, guys, and he's the most likely of the trio of receivers to be able to take it to the house on any given play.
So a great article out of the Sun Sentinel a couple of weeks ago about Will Fuller and what his contract entails and how incentive-based his contract is. And the best part about all of the incentives, which include things like receptions and touchdowns, which he'll get some extra money if he gets 9 touchdowns this upcoming season. Kicker is he has never scored 9 touchdowns in a season, so that's going to be fun if he tries to get to that number. But these incentives only kick in if the Dolphins are a top 20 offense. So there's team incentive and individual incentive involved. There's an incentive for him to bring the team along with him as his own individual interests and money pan out. So yes, Kevin, I do think that he is going to be, a leader in the locker room. If for no other reason, then there's $1 million extra out there or $3 million extra out there for him. Should all these incentives kick in, but I am so gun shy on Will Fuller. I am, and it's because I've been burned by him in the past, and I had him for a while. And then he got hurt when he was in Houston. And I know I'm not the only one out there who has been burned by this guy. So for me, and this is to speak nothing as to what he has become or what he will become in a new situation, but and it might be to my detriment, I'm staying away from Will Fuller with a 1,000-foot pole because I just don't want to deal with that headache every Thursday when I'm setting my lineup or Sunday morning when I'm setting my lineup. Will Fuller be available? Or am I going to stash him on a roster spot in the hopes that he might come back this season or what have you? So I just would rather not have to deal with it and look elsewhere. There is a bevy of wide receiver talent, and there's another one on this team that I'd rather take a flyer on than Will Fuller, just to see what he's got going. And we'll talk about him in a second, but that's where I'm at with Will Fuller. It is completely personal and has nothing to do with anything other than it's my own personal feelings.
Alex, I'm right there with you. Honestly, I've never wanted anything ever to do with Will Fuller. I'll take the 200 plus, 20, 30 plus games and to give him someone else. And I won't take him. I'm fine with that. But Will Fuller, yeah, it was definitely an interesting signing. I think it was something that we needed to have a guy who can stretch the field like that on our team here early on. And yeah, could he be the guy who ends up being our number one wide receiver? Yeah, absolutely. That's his ceiling, and he has a big ceiling about him. He also has a low floor as well, and it's been the injuries over his career. I think he did miss a quarter of a game last year due to injury, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was the Baltimore game. He left early. But that's the big kicker, is that he's been injured his entire career, and he just happened to stay healthy this past season here. It's a little fishy to me personally, but I know people have argued with me about that's not why he was healthy. He worked out. He trained harder this season to do a little bit better with his hamstrings, which sure, maybe that could be it to some extent. But where did he sign with? He signed with the Miami Dolphins in Florida, in rain weather, outside on Miami's field, not the greatest field in the world. Where did he come from? Houston, the Dome, the night field. Is he going to be able to stay healthy for these games here? He's played in 19 career games outside. He's only had 6 touchdowns. There's a difference between playing indoors and outdoors, and the way that, depending on how they use him on that offense, it could be very beneficial or it could not be. And I think it's not going to be that beneficial to him. I think you're going to see a guy who can be a boom or bust wide receiver 3 or flex option for you most weeks. Probably most of a bust, and that's how I kind of see Will Fuller. I don't see him being a guy who can stay consistently on the field healthy enough for me to want to take him in most drafts this season.
Okay. Everybody has a price tag, right? So let's start here. If Will Fuller's there in the 10th, are you drafting him?
Yep.
Yes. Yeah.
Alex?
My wide receiver 4.
No.
Okay.
Alex is just out, period.
Okay.
I'm out.
Alex,
I'm just
all right.
out. So
That's fine.
wherever you go
Alex
with this,
out.
I'm done.
All right, that's fine. Alex is out. In the 9th round, are you drafting?
Yep.
It depends who's there. It really depends on how my team's structured and who's there.
Okay. So maybe we're still in, but this will probably kick it out. In the 8th round, are you drafting him?
Yep.
No.
So Derek's left here. Derek,
seventh is where I draw the line, and there's a reason for the 7th round is because his ADP right now is 83, which puts that at the very tail end of the 7th round. And like the last guy that we just talked about, Devante Parker, I was talking about the fact that when I'm putting what's going to most likely be my 3rd wide receiver on a team, which is the 7th, is about that makeup. I want a guy with a lot of upside. I want a guy with a big ceiling, somebody that can swing for the fences and hit me a home run and win a week on. And there's few wide receivers out there that can do it like a Will Fuller can in the 7th round. So here's another question for y'all. Devonta Parker right now is going right around the same ADP. So we'll call it right there, back of the 7th, beginning of the 8th. And I have a feeling I know where both Kevin and Steve are going to go, but I'm curious with where Kevin's going. But the question out there is, you've got to pick one of these 2 Miami Dolphin receivers with a 7th round pick. Who you taking?
With a 7th?
ADP of 83, which would be a 7th round pick.
I'll take Fuller for the upside. But truth be told, I'd rather take Cortland Sutton.
Fair enough. So would I, but
I'm telling you, there are other options out there.
In the seventh, yeah, and that's why I just wanted to see where everybody's reach was. In the seventh, yes, I feel like there's other options, but that's what I was seeing. Like when you start getting down, I don't want Deebo Samuel. Like I'm not a believer in San Francisco taking Deebo Samuel. So Deebo's also a guy who's going at the top of the 8th. So it's right around the same spot as Fuller. So I'll take Fuller over Deebo. So that's kind of where my line is drawn, much like where his ADP is. But if I can get Courtland Sutton, I'll take my chances with the ACL injury and what they're going to be doing in Denver as opposed to the inconsistencies regarding health around Will Fuller. Like that's just where I'm going to draw the line.
Okay. Here's an interesting one for you. So I've got 5 wide receivers with an ADP all from 79 to 86. So they're all right there in line with one another. Brandon Cooks, ADP of 79, Jarvis Landry, ADP of 81, Fuller of 83, Jerry Jeudy at 84, and Curtis Samuel at 86. Out of those 5 receivers, which I'll put them very much in the 7th round, just rank them for me. Which receivers are you going with there in order?
Jeudy. Who was the first one you said?
Brandon Cooks, Jarvis Landry, Will Fuller, Jerry Jeudy, and Curtis Samuel.
Jerry Jeudy, Curtis Samuel. Who was the first one? I keep forgetting the first
Brandon
one.
Cooks.
Brandon Cooks, Jarvis Landry, then Will Fuller. So it's me, Jeudy, Curtis Samuel, Brandon Cooks, Jarvis Landry, Will Fuller.
Okay. Alex, I know Will Fuller's number 5, so give me the 1 through 4.
I don't like the quarterback throwing to any of these guys. Come back to me. Put the options in the chat for me, will you?
Okay.
I mean, if Bridgewater is Judy's quarterback, you have to kind of like that. You saw what he did last year with Carolina.
If Bridgewater is Judy's quarterback, Kevin's not wearing that shirt for very much longer.
No, I like Jeudy overall, so Judy's first on my board as well. Let's see here. I think I'm going Fuller second behind that. Like, I don't trust the situation that we don't know how many games Deshaun Watson's going to miss. So that instantly puts Brandon Cooks to 5 because there's the most uncertainty around what he's going to be doing. Curtis Samuel or Jarvis Landry. I'm going to say Curtis Samuel because we know Curtis Samuel will be my 3 because we know Fitzpatrick loves to sling the ball around, and Curtis Samuel will be able to do some of those great things. And Landry, while very consistent, is also in a very, very run-heavy offense. OBJ is coming back, so we're not quite sure how that dynamic is going to work as far as the breakout of targets. So, yes, so Jeudy, Fuller, Samuel, Landry, and then Cooks.
So I'm a little Fuller definitely 5 for me. Beyond that, Kevin, your point about we don't know what the quarterback situation is going to be like in Houston, so that scares the ever living out of me. So I go Cooks 4. I'll take Jeudy 3rd because the quarterback situation in Denver scares the ever living out of me as well. Not to mention Courtland Sutton's going to be coming back, and that will.
That's why I love Jeudy,
and that could very well be the case. So I go Jeudy 3, and then I'll take Landry 2, and only because of the gunslinger that is Ryan Fitzpatrick in Washington, I'll take Curtis Samuel 1.
Fair enough. For me, I think it's really going to be Samuel, Fuller, Jeudy, then we'll go Landry and Cooks, kind of in that order there for me. and a lot of the same reasons that you guys have. But I've been trying to get Curtis Samuel everywhere that I can. I like that upside there. So if I'm 7th round, that's where I'm going there first and foremost. So, but any other thoughts on Will Fuller the 5th? Alrighty. Well, that'll move us over to Jaylen Waddle, the 6th overall pick there, wide receiver, coming and teaming back up with Tua, former Alabama teammates there, now Miami Dolphin teammates. Guys, what are your thoughts on Jaylen Waddle?
Electric. He's a playmaker with the ball in his hands. I don't expect him to run very many deep routes as long as Fuller stays healthy, but I do expect him to see a ton of targets his way. Someone that can go right, just past that linebacker, let Tua find a gap, and let him get the ball in his hands with space, right? That's the Jaylen Waddle recipe for success in the NFL. They used him slightly differently in Alabama, but in the pros, get the ball in his hands with space to run and let him go, because Waddle is electric, and I think that he will be very fun to watch down in Miami. So you guys should have a lot of fun cheering him on week in and week out, because I think that connection there will help to his progression, and I would not be surprised to see him with 70, 73 catches for probably about 900 yards or so. Touchdowns, who knows, right? Touchdowns are a little bit harder to predict, but I think they're going to see a whole lot of Jaylen Waddle, and it's going to be a whole lot of 7 to 12 yard routes, or average depth of target, if you will, for Jaylen Waddle, and then his yak is just going to be insane.
Yeah, I'll be the first to admit that I was surprised when I saw Miami draft him. I didn't think that receiver was where they were going to go, especially when you consider some of the other pieces that were still on the board when they picked him, mainly Penei Sewell as an O-line to protect that quarterback of yours. But I agree. I think he is one that's worth, obviously if you're in a dynasty and in a rookie draft, he's probably going. Do you guys have that? Do you have that number for me, Derek, of what his rookie ADP is right offhand?
For rookie drafts, he's back in the
1.9, 1.8, or anywhere between 8 and 10.
Which
in
feels
super flex leagues.
It feels like a steal at that point, doesn't it? Because of what he can do when he does get the football in his hand. So I would have targeted him a little sooner if I was in that middle of the first round for a rookie draft. I just think that that there will be that connection there between Tua and him, and he is a guy that if I'm going to get a piece of this Miami receiving room, he would be the one that I'm most intrigued by, mainly because of my feelings about Will Fuller. And I don't know that Devonta Parker is ever going to get back to 2019 Devonta Parker, but new shiny toy, right? Like that, it's easy to look at, and he will have the benefit of OTAs and a rookie minicamp and training camp and preseason games, and I think that just bodes a little bit better for him.
Yeah, he's definitely somebody I'm very intrigued about taking. I mean, again, I wish they took Devontae Smith. I really wish they did. I love Devontae Smith. But, yeah, Jaylen Waddle, fast, explosive. He's definitely going to be someone I'm targeting. Again, a lot of my late round rookie drafts, definitely in redraft leagues this year in the later rounds, as long as his ADP doesn't creep up real quickly during training camp. He's definitely going to be someone I think early on. He may play week one in place of Will Fuller because of the suspension. But you might see him get worked in as the season goes on a little slower than we probably want him to, because I think he's going to be involved in the kick return and all that stuff, because I don't think Jakeem Grant's going to be there by the beginning of the season, unfortunately. I just think because money and everything like that, Waddle will take over, because that's where he was really good in college, that kick returning stuff. He was so good at returning kicks, returning punts. But again, he's going to see the field at some point this season as well, and that's what makes him intriguing because I think his connection with Tua and what he can present on the field in most likely the slot role with, Will Fuller on the outside and Park on the other side. You just give him the ball in open space and he's going to go with it. So he's definitely someone that I'm targeting in a lot of my rookie drafts late, and he's definitely someone I want to take a shot on in best ball and late round and redrafts right now because I think his explosiveness will fit perfectly in the NFL.
Yeah. He's definitely a very intriguing guy, and that may be one of those. I was looking up his ADP while we were talking as far as like redraft would go, and he's looking like a 153 overall. So you're talking like a 12th, 13th round kind of guy there, and that's probably the way that I'm going to go, especially if that ADP kind of holds true as we start really approaching the season, because that is a guy that can provide you the upside, is a guy that for a draft piece is a incredible value, especially that late with what kind of upside and ceiling you can truly get there. But no, as a guy that right now I think is actually being overlooked a little bit when in some of those rookie drafts, and the ones that I've been participating in, they kind of fall a little funny where you can even see Jaylen Waddle go right there at the back half of the first, that 11th, 12th overall pick. So it's kind of interesting to see just how folks are really, really placing the value on him going into the season, what they're suspecting his role is going to be this early on, but definitely a guy worth taking a flyer on and definitely a guy that you'll want on your roster long-term.
So with the NFL being the copycat league that it is, without Waddle running the 40 because of his injury, he has almost the identical measurements of one Tyreek Hill. Not to say that that's the production to expect, but this is in the copycat league, right? They see how the Chiefs are successful and how they use Tyreek kind of all over the field, and he does play outside. He plays inside. They use him in punt returns at times when they're looking for explosive plays. Like, I can see very much how they're going to try and mimic his usage on the field to how the Chiefs line Tyreek up. Production aside, we'll see how that comes. But that's where I see, things matching up. They're both 5'10". They're both about 185. Like, let him get a couple pounds on him, a little bit of an NFL body to kind of take some of the abuse of being hit by, NFL defensive players. But I do see him being able to line up all over. You're going to see some jet sweeps. You're going to see a couple different things here coming out of Jaylen Waddle because of his ability to make guys miss and find that open space and get into the end zone. It'll be exciting to watch.
Absolutely. Well, let's go ahead and move on over to the tight end room. They got Mike Gesicki there, who finished as tight end number 7 last year, 53 receptions, 85 targets, 703 yards with 6 touchdowns through the air. Guys, your thoughts on Mike Gesicki?
My only concern is that Gesicki's going to lose targets to Waddle because they're the depth of route, if you will. Based off of what I just said about Waddle, I think those are going to be fairly similar. Now, Gesicki's a bigger bodied. He's probably going to be more of the go-to for first down opportunities, right? Some things that he can control the middle of the field and have guys gravitate towards him, and that's where you have Waddle come in behind. Like, you can see how they start scheming up some of these route combinations. So Gesicki's a top 10 guy. He's been a guy that I think the fantasy world has kept an eye on ever since he came out of Penn State. We liked his landing spot. We like his measurables. We like his ability to catch the ball. We like the fact that he has, 4.6 speed for a tight end is pretty damn good. Like, Gesicki's a guy that I'm absolutely going to look after, but with only 53 catches, yes, a top 10 tight end's great, but I can get a lot of, I can get 2 different tight ends and just play Russian roulette with him if I wait, with him not being in that top 5. And I do not think he's going to be a top 5 tight end upcoming, just based off of how I see this Miami Dolphins offense running.
Yeah, I think that the biggest issue for Gesicki now is that they have a pretty crowded wide receiver room, and Tua's only going to throw the ball so many times. It's a finite number. They're going to run the football. They're going to establish that run game down there. That what Miami wants to do is run the football, play great defense. And so when it comes to his passing work, it is going to be – I think it's going to be a challenge this year just because you've got a quarterback that's got another year in the system. And you guys all know how I feel about young quarterbacks and what their best friends are with pass-catching tight ends that are big targets and good hands out of the backfield that can be an easy escape valve for these guys, these young quarterbacks where the game is so fast for them. So I think that it will be a little bit of an issue for Gosicki, but he's still going to be a top 10 tight end. The problem is the drop off from the top 3 tight ends to the rest of the top 10 is massive. And so, Kevin, you have a good idea there with the strategy of, you don't want to reach for a tight end if it's not one of the top 2 or 3 guys. You'd rather just wait and see what you can get later on and build your roster out the other way. In tight end premium leagues, he's a little bit of a conundrum because there is 53 catches. Like you'd like to see that number be a little bit higher, but it is still a tight end. So you have to take it with a grain of salt. He is valuable. It's just a matter of getting him at the right value when it comes to a redraft.
Yeah, I agree with you guys on that, honestly. I mean, if you're expecting him to be that round 6 to 9, maybe 10 range kind of guy you want to go grab, you're doing it wrong because it just that value is just not going to be there. He's probably going to be a top 10 tight end, yes. He's got the talent for it. He's probably going to be Tua's safety blanket per se. And perhaps even having those weapons there to open up the field more might be actually beneficial for him to actually see more open space because when Mike Gesicki gets the ball in his hands, he may not be the 4.2s, the 4.4s, but the man's fast. And he can do things when he gets the ball in the open field. He can jump players, whatever. He can step on them. He can do a lot of great things. And if you can get him at round 10 or later, I think you got yourself a pretty solid tight end all season. He may not blow up and be a top 5 tight end, but he's going to give you production at least every single week that you can be happy. Like, hey, he got me 7 or 8 points. Not the greatest, but that's what he's going to get you. Some weeks he'll get you better, but he's going to get you, I think, a solid floor for you each and every single week. Because the offense is opening up, I think that's going to help Mike Gesicki out this coming season. But if people value him as a top 7 tight end, which he could be technically, I'm staying clear of that. But if he's more of that tight end 10 for somebody and you can get him in that round 10, sign me up because I think you're going to get a consistent tight end all year.
Yeah, right now he is tight end 9 coming off the board. The 9th overall tight end coming off the board, but his ADP puts him squarely in, right about round 9 to it. So for that reason, he will not be making appearances on many of my rosters out there because I very much subscribe to the fact of just late tight end. Like Kevin was saying, I'd rather punt the position and grab whoever I can in the 13th, 14th round and just, gamble that week to week and play the streaming game with it than try and spend up on somebody in the 9th round where I can get additional pieces for my roster that are going to be more impactful for me over the course of the season. That being said, too, there's an interesting thing going on with Gesicki. So you look at last year, right? He had 6 touchdowns coming through. 0 of those touchdowns came from plays where they lined up inside at the 5-yard line or less. So those 5 zone targets, which is where most tight ends tend to eat, he got 0 of them. And when you look further on, he was scoring touchdowns from basically the 20-yard line, that very far out of the red zone. Only had 2 of those. 4 of his touchdowns were 20-plus yard touchdowns to it. And you talk about touchdowns, which were a big component of where he finished from a tight end ranking last year, being incredibly difficult to reproduce. So this is one of those that it could go one of two ways, right? When you think about it from the standpoint of he could be that big body target that when they get into the red zone, they utilize him more this year, which could save that touchdown production. But with some of those other additions that they have on the wide receiving core, the same case could be made that they're going to target those guys when they get down there. And if that's the case, you probably see him going from 6 touchdowns to like 3 or 4 touchdowns next year, which take him from probably being, tight end 7, 8, all the way back down to tight end 12, 13. And so for those reasons, again, I'm not going to be spending up into a 9th round type of draft capital on that. I'll punt the position and I'll get a tight end that, is touchdown dependent, but those touchdown dependent tight ends typically have offenses where they're going to utilize that tight end once they get into that red zone. And that's not necessarily what we saw from Miami this past year, especially when Tua took over there. So
he's also in a contract year actually too. This is his contract year. So that could be beneficial as well to see if he makes step up. As another positive note on him, because they did sign Hunter Long, and they didn't sign, but they drafted Hunter Long in the 4th round this year, a guy who's kind of an overall tight end kind of individual. So that could be them maybe moving on after Gosicki this coming season. So if he wants to stay with Miami or look for a big contract after this, this is the year for him to do it. So,
yep. Now you've thrown another wrench in my conundrum there because, we always talk about look for guys that are in contract years and prove it years and those types of things. But this is one of those that there's enough question marks on both sides, either for and against, that I'm just going to be out on this one. And I'll be looking, my tried and true strategy of finding a tight end in the 13th, 14th round and just streaming the position throughout the season and moving along that way. So, there any other tight ends we want to talk about down there in Miami?
Not really. Not consistently enough. I mean, there's going to be definitely, again, we have Durham Smite. I think Adam Shaheem is still there. Hunter Long. I mean, these guys, they're going to get a touchdown or 2 here and there, depending on the formation of the plays, but they're not someone that you can consistently add on your fantasy teams right now.
Very true. Well, let's go ahead and head over to the quarterback room. And Tua Tagovailoa is still there coming into his sophomore season. We'll see what he does there, but finished as QB 32 last year, 186 completions on 290 attempts, 1,814 yards with 11 passing touchdowns, 5 interceptions, and had another 109 and 3 on the ground. Guys, your thoughts on Tua?
I want to see Tua run more. Normally you're talking about, we want our quarterback to run less. And this is actually one of those opposite situations. Like, Tua's ability to extend plays with his legs will help make him a better passer. And while he wasn't the pure runner that I'm going to say Jalen Hurts just because they played Alabama at the same time, right? They were that little bit of a contrast. Hurts scrambled a little bit more, could make plays happen with his legs a little bit more easily than Tua could. But Tua still showed that ability. He's swift of foot enough that he can get outside. I want to see him scramble a little bit more, extend some plays, use these deep threats, whether it's Waddle going deep, whether it's Will Fuller going deep, something like that. But I do think we're going to see improvement. I think Tua was very much a guy who was recovering from an injury, who missed all the extra opportunities coming into him in the NFL due to the COVID-shortened season that was 2020. So I'm not writing him off. I'm not in the camp that thinks, that was a waste of a pick and they're going to get rid of him in 4 more years or 3 more years and not to give him his 5th-year option. Like, I'm not buying that. I think Tua has a pedigree about him that he rallies guys. It's one of the things that the Dolphins liked about him last year. I like the fact that now Ryan Fitzpatrick isn't there, so that way Tua has to finish some of these games. Like, part of being a professional athlete is learning how to overcome adversity. And I do feel like that's where the Dolphins stunted some of his growth last year. It was Tua would face some adversity, and because they were in a playoff push, the Dolphins went, whoa. All right, you come out and sit over here and watch Fitzpatrick because he's played for 14 seasons. And so that way, if we lose the game, we can blame it on him. But don't take offense to this, but we're going to sit you down because we don't think you can come back and win this game. That's how I read it as a fan. Now, what they're telling him inside the locker room, God only knows, right? That stuff stays inside the locker room. The reports that we got was Tua took it like a real pro. He understood the mechanics behind them pulling him off of these games, but I'm excited to see him finish this stuff out. I want to see him push in the fourth quarter. I want to see him run a 2-minute offense when they're down by 4 and they need a touchdown. These are the things that I want to see before I can truly sign off on Tua being a solid NFL quarterback or, the next lifelong backup, because he's too good to ignore, but he's not good enough to do whatever. I want to believe, that he's an NFL starter, but it's too soon to tell, guys. Like, the Dolphins didn't do us any favors in showing us that last year. So now with the full offseason, I'm ready to see it. I'm willing to take a flyer on him as my second quarterback in a super flex league, especially if I'm really waiting on that second quarterback. Is he my top option? No, probably not, just based off of fantasy football scoring and how those formats work. But there are worse options than Tua. Denver has one of them, and
2 of them.
No, 2 of them. Yeah, absolutely, 2 of them. So, and quite frankly, I trust that more than I trust the situation that's going to go on in Chicago with them saying Andy Dalton's the starter, but Justin Fields is there. You have Trey Lance in San Francisco. So, does Jimmy G do this year or not? So, from a fantasy football standpoint, Jacoby Brissett's there, but Jacoby Brissett is not as good as Ryan Fitzpatrick. So they're not going to pull Tua and let Jacoby go in there and take his licks. That's not what they brought him in for. Jacoby is a true backup. So I'm excited about this. I hope the kid does well. I think they've done a good job putting pieces around him. Now it's film study, preparation, growth, and development. Let's see what this kid can do and let it roll out there. Because, God, I am tired of the Patriots winning that division. And I don't like the Bills that much either, so I might as well root for the Dolphins on that side.
I think the biggest issue for Tua last year, and Kevin, you said it, was the fact that there was always somebody right there, right? He couldn't go out and play free. He wasn't allowed to go out and make some of these rookie mistakes because of the situation that Miami was in, and that they needed to win games to get into the playoffs. I mean, that was their ultimate goal last year. It wasn't like they were going to make a run in the playoffs. Just wanted to get in the tournament and see what could happen. But I mean, it clearly wasn't a team that had Super Bowl aspirations. But you want to establish a winning culture, so you have to do what you can to win. And I think that's what Brian Flores was doing down there, was showing that I'm not afraid to do whatever it takes to win. I'm willing to sit my first round quarterback just so we can win a football game. But I think that also has a downside to it, in that Tua is constantly looking over his shoulder and he can't play free. And when football players play free, that's when they play their best. And sure, there will be mistakes made along the way, and he didn't have the benefit of the full off season. And so, again, he was learning on the job, like a lot of the guys that we talked about. To me, and Kevin, I'm right there with you. It is put up or shut up time, which is kind of unfair to say for a sophomore quarterback, for a quarterback going into his second season. But it is put up or shut up time for Tua, and we'll learn a lot about him in terms of what he's got, because you don't face all that much adversity when you're at the University of Alabama. And the game that he faced the most adversity, he was able to come in and play free because they were down by, 3 scores, 4 scores. And he was able to come in and just do what he wanted to do because, hell, what are you going to do? Lose the game? We're already losing. You can only go up from there. So I think that there will be a lot of, we need to see that growth. We need to see that development out of him. And you're right, Kevin. He's not a QB1 by any means, any stretch of the imagination. But in a super flex league, I think that if you get him at the right spot, if he's still hanging around there when you're shopping around for a second quarterback that is going to be a starter, and you can plug in and week out, know that you're going to get starter numbers out of, Tua is a very good option there.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm still on the Tua train personally, guys. Like as a fan, as an analyst, I think he can still provide what people saw when he was coming out of college here. I mean, again, he got that injury November 2019. He started his first game, I think it was October 30th of 2020. Less than a year ago. I mean, the injury recovery time on that typical injury was 6 to 12 months. And even then, how much are you really getting on the field to do preparation? How much practice were you really getting into? It was him just kind of getting back in the groove of things. Again, you guys are right. He had to sit behind Fitzpatrick and had to hey, I'm going to jump in the game if you're not performing. And he didn't want to make those mistakes on the field to have them do that anyway. So it just never worked out for him overall. I mean, you got to think the receiving core was pretty bad most of the second half of the season with him on the field. With Parker missing games, with Preston Williams played really good in the one game they actually played together outside of that Rams game, and he was gone for the rest of the season. Gesicki missed a game or two here. I mean, they were down to Lynn Bowden as one of their starting wide receivers at one point. So they gave him weapons now. They have gave him weapons that actually can help him spread the field here. He's probably one of the more accurate quarterbacks in this league here. I think he finished third in the accuracy rating among quarterbacks last season. And again, everyone is just about not throwing the ball downfield deep. I think that was mostly the OC not giving him that opportunity to do that. Like Brian Fitzpatrick, you trust a seasoned vet to make those kind of throws. You don't trust a rookie off the bat to do those kind of things. We have new coordinators now, 2 coordinators apparently in Miami, that I think will mix things up in here. And, in college, his yards per attempt was 11.2. It was better than both Herbert and Joe Burrows in their college years, respectively, the year they came out. And everyone loves Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert as the guys who can throw the ball downfield deep. So I think Tua can do it. It just, now you gave him the weapons to do it. He's building. If you guys are Miami fans, but he's been putting a lot of work in the weight room, trying to get stronger and bigger. I mean, he looks completely different than he did a year ago to today. So he's given the opportunity. He's given the keys to the car. Just that he just got to learn how to drive it. And I think he has that opportunity with the talent that he has this coming season.
Yeah. The interesting thing is with Tua, that move that they kept doing, I see that move happen a lot in baseball. Very rarely do you see it happen in football, where you're talking about a coach going, "Hey, bring in the righty. Let's close this game out." So it was very interesting there, and I'm not going to labor the point there because you guys have touched on that. But what will be very interesting to see is what do they do? Are they going to really let him loose and really run? Because when you looked at it, he averaged about 4 rushing attempts a game last year. Over the course of what's going to be a 17-game season, you're talking about him, if that holds true in a similar fashion, is he going to be a guy that's going to get 70 rushing attempts over the course of a season, which as a quarterback, that's going to provide a very good floor there. But is the case going to be that they're going to really let him loose and do those types of things? And at which case then, are we going to see him potentially get to 100 rushing attempts on a year, scramble drills, things like that? And at which case, if he does, that'll be a very interesting tell there, because right now over the last few seasons in the NFL, quarterbacks that have a 100 rushing attempts in a season, it's a strange little benchmark there, but at 100 rushing attempts, only one over the last 3 seasons has finished outside of QB 12 territory, and that was Cam last year on that very poor Patriots offense there towards that back half. But so I don't know that he's going to necessarily get to 100 rush attempts. If he does, that's going to send him way up the boards there. But I think realistically where you can expect him is probably going to be about quarterback 20 when it's all said and done on this year. I don't know that you're going to see him really break into the teens, but that's probably about where I'm going to see him early on here, about QB 20 on the year, which would make it a worthwhile super flex option. So, all righty, guys. Any other final thoughts on the Miami Dolphins?
Go Fins.
Hashtag fins up, huh?
Fins up.
All right. So, guys, let's go ahead and hit up some news and a little bit coming out. Not a ton going on right now with the NFL news. And you've got Cortland Sutton is expected to be ready for camp. Zach Ertz not reporting to camp amid some trade rumors out there. The Giants went out and signed Kelvin Benjamin as a tight end. And Travis Etienne has been working out as a wide receiver in the rookie camps. So, guys, what do you make of some of this news coming out of the league?
I'm still trying to figure out why the hell the Giants signed Kelvin Benjamin. I'm really at a loss for that one. And that did make headlines.
A lot
not
of them.
Just something to talk about, but that actually made NFL headlines of something that was newsworthy, and I can't for the life of me figure out why. But overall, the ETN stuff, smoke and mirrors, right? Yeah, he lined up out there. What formation, what playbook in the NFL doesn't have a formation where running backs line up out wide? At least once or twice a game, right? It's just personnel groupings. Big freaking deal. It doesn't even remotely, raise a flag on ETN or James Robinson. I don't think that changes. Are they going to try and find ways to get ETN the ball? Yeah, possibly. Is there a familiarity there between Trevor Lawrence and ETN? Absolutely. Is he going to line up outside 30% of the time? Hell no. That is just absolute smokescreen horse shit coming from Urban Meyer.
It's Urban trying to make all the James Robinson owners breathe a sigh of relief, only to get their hopes and dreams crushed when the season starts. This to me, it's much ado about nothing, right? ETN's working as a wide receiver in rookie camp. Okay, yeah, we haven't seen Trevor Lawrence turn around and hand the ball off to him. More so, it's just turn and hand the ball to him. Or pitch it to him, but that chemistry is there. They don't have to worry about that. It's not like two dudes that are meeting for the first time on a football field. They know each other. They've got it down. That's okay. Let's try and work him out in some other areas before we get the whole team here, and maybe get them a little more up to speed or show some other things. Ertz not reporting, not a big deal to me either. There were a lot of vets that weren't going to report early to some of these mini camps as part of the CBA. There was something with the CBA where they didn't have to, and if he didn't want to go, it's not like it's detrimental to his contract or anything like that. It could be that he doesn't want to play in Philadelphia anymore, but for me right now, it just means he didn't want to show up to OTAs. And let's be honest, does he really need to? The guy's an established player in this league. He needs 4 or 5 reps, and he's probably good to play a season. So the Sutton news is great for Broncos fans. The bad news is that we still only have Teddy Bridgewater or Drew Lock throwing to him.
It's not June 2nd yet. Relax.
I know. And then, yeah, Kelvin Benjamin, whatever. I'm not even gonna try to make sense of it. Not even gonna try.
Who knows? Maybe he paid them to join the team. Who knows? But this time of year, guys, a lot of things you're hearing outside of people saying they're playing this season. At least it's all smoke and mirrors. I mean, they're hyping up different things. They're trying to throw off people on what they're planning on doing this year. And you're gonna hear a lot of that over the next couple months here, especially when the rookies get in there and mix in with the veterans. And the coaches are going to start hyping up their players. That's what they're supposed to do, right? They're not supposed to say, he's doing okay. No, he's doing the best job possible ever. Kyle Trask is an amazing quarterback, Bruce Aaron just said out there a couple weeks ago. I mean, they're going to say these things about their quarterbacks, their rookies, their players. They're just going to say these things. So they don't overhype those things, but it's definitely going to be a fun time to listen to all these people talking right now. So
beware the coach speak.
Yes.
In the world we live in too, right? There's so much hyperbole because there's shows like ours where we need to talk about something, right? You the show goes on whether you want it to or not. That daily show is going to happen whether there's news happening or not. So sometimes you're going to have to make a mountain out of a molehill just so you can fill 10 minutes of your 3-hour block that you have on the afternoon. It's like it's just the world we live in now with all these media outlets and everybody trying to cover the NFL 24/7, 365. There's going to be days, there's going to be weeks where there really isn't anything, but you've got to still fill your show.
Very true. Well, guys, any other thoughts on the news?
I think the one thing that I saw right before we kicked off was the agreement that the Eagles players and the front office made regarding their offseason. In that they are not going to hold. So they had their OTAs or whatever after this week. I think they're done with OTAs. They're not going to run OTAs. And in mini camp, they are not going to be running any 7-on-7 drills. Now, while some people might see that and go, yeah, big freaking deal, I see that and go, that is a big deal, because 7-on-7 typically in these NFL practices is what they go live at. This is when they are, you want to start talking about when guys, get heated with each other because they've been going up against the same guy, and you try and get the pads popping and a little bit of that football callus on your body a little bit. A lot of that comes in those 7-on-7 drills. And the Eagles agreed that they will not run 7-on-7 drills in minicamp in hopes to preserve the health of the players. I don't know if that's going to translate to anything, but if a bunch of Eagles start dropping like flies inside the first 3-4 weeks of the season, you can kind of bet your bottom dollar that will be traced back to the fact, well, they didn't actually do anything in minicamp. Like they looked at their playbook, they walked through the routes, they did some conditioning, but they didn't actually play football. So we'll see how this develops, but I just wanted to point that out because this is the first team that's kind of made that establishment, as all these teams are trying to kind of negotiate with the team's labor representatives and how they're going to handle some of the off-season stuff. The Eagles are the first ones that said, all right, we're going to do away with OTAs and we're not going to do 7-on-7 in minicamp. So who knows who else might follow this trend.
I like it. You also, very late in the day as well, I missed it on the notes, but you had Joe Burrow showing that he's going to be full go for the, it's being reported that he's going to be full go for the opener, regular season opener. So that would be one question mark answered there, so to speak. But let's go ahead and talk about some NFL schedule. And we're going to put a little bit of a twist on this one. So we'll talk, of course, about what you kind of like, what you don't like about the NFL schedule, that kind of stuff. But we're going to put the fantasy twist on it, of course. And what we're looking for here is either a team that you're liking the schedule as far as you're looking to actively go after guys for positional grouping, things like that, because they're on this team and they have a great strength of schedule, or guys that you're looking to potentially stay away from because of the fact that they have a very tough schedule, something like that coming up there. So we'll go ahead and start on the favorable side. Guys, what are you seeing as far as a very favorable schedule, or your best thing you like most about the schedule this year?
I can start here, and this is going to be a real shocker to you guys. But the team that I like the most based on their schedule, based solely on their schedule and no other mitigating factors, are the Indianapolis Colts, and specifically the quarterback and the running back, Carson Wentz and Jonathan Taylor. Now, I know that this isn't exactly a stretch because it's Carson Wentz for me. If you've listened to this show at all, you know that I love Carson Wentz. And Jonathan Taylor is one of the premier backs in the NFL. But consider this. Their division is not great right now. So they get 6 divisional games. And that's nice when you can knock out, 6 games against teams that are in different areas. But the real kicker here for me, they get the Raiders late. And who knows what the Raiders are going to be come the end of the season. Will they have packed it in and turn their attention towards 22, or will they still be trying to hold on to a threat? So the Raiders game late bodes well for Jonathan Taylor and Carson Wentz. So that's why I like those two just based on the schedule.
All right, so on the favorable side, I'm digging Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers schedule. Like, it is just kind of chalked right up for them to get off to a hot start. They have back-to-back home games with the Cowboys and then the Falcons, followed by their first true road test with going to LA to play the Rams. But then you have the Tom Brady homecoming in week 4. Like, if the Buccaneers are going to win that game, if for nothing else, that Tom Brady might retire if they lose it. Like, that is his, aside from winning another Super Bowl, this has to be the game that he has circled and absolutely said, I'm going to throw for 500 yards and 7 touchdowns, and I'm going to bury Bill Belichick. And it'll be interesting to see how Belichick scouts Brady after all the years that they're together. So outside of that, obviously they have their divisional games, right? But then they play at Philadelphia. They play home against Chicago. Let's see. At Indianapolis is kind of their toughest game on the back half of the schedule in week 12. And then, they host the Bills, they host the Saints down the stretch. Week 17, they kind of get a softball going to New York to play the Jets. So that helps for the back end. And then they wrap up at home against the Panthers. So however this shakes out, I really think that this schedule catered towards everything Tampa Bay. They really don't have any massive pitfalls. Yes, there's challenges. The Rams are not going to be a cakewalk, right? The game in New England, as much as I just said that, it's not going to be a cakewalk, right? Those guys were together for so long that Belichick knows what Brady doesn't like to do well. He will find a way to scheme for that. But aside from those things, they play a lot of defenses with not so great secondaries, and it's going to allow Brady in the second year of this Bruce Arians offense to really unlock a bunch of the potential we didn't see until down the stretch in 2020. So I fully expect Star Wars numbers out of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in 2021.
Nice. Well, I'm going to go with, you guys will like this a little bit here, but I'm going to go with the Denver Broncos. Honestly, if you look at their starting schedule early on, I mean, they have the Giants, the Jags, the Jets early on. And I mean, and you need to go to the playoffs, guys. I mean, right before at least week 17 of the championship week, you have Detroit, Cincinnati, the Raiders. During the season, you have the Raiders, you have, Washington, not Washington, but Dallas, Philly's not that great in the secondary. So I think both sides of the ball, if you're looking to make a determining factor on some guys that are probably lower, like DJ Moore right now, not DJ Moore, freaking Jerry Jeudy and Colin Sutton later in those like 5 to 7 range, I wouldn't be mad at one of those as my wide receiver 2 right now because the matchups are going to be good. I truly believe that Teddy Bridgewater will be your starting quarterback, probably start week 1, maybe at least by week 4, whatever it may be. I know it's sad, guys, but he did decent. He's not great, but he did decent. And I think as long as he's starting for you guys most of the season, these matchups are favorable. And even the run game with Gordon and with Williams, I mean, Jags was bad, Detroit was bad, Cincinnati was bad. There's a lot there that you guys could go after there. And I think if you go with the Broncos as a team that you might want to pick a couple pieces up, you might get some favorable matchups early, and you might get some really nice matchups at the end of the season.
Yeah, I like it. The Broncos definitely have some positional groupings that should feast on that schedule there, so it'll be very interesting there. I actually had 2 that I liked out there, both of them around the running back room, and One of them is Cleveland. I like Cleveland's schedule really for the entire season on how that's going to shake out. They have a couple of tougher matchups there kind of going down the stretch where they'll see Baltimore, and other weak type of rotation there. But outside of that, they should get some pretty good run up there. The playoff matches for the first 2 weeks look pretty good there as well. Jacksonville, whoever really establishes themselves as that running back there, have great week 15 and 16 matchups there for the what's most likely going to be the first and second round of the playoffs for a lot of teams. And you're talking Houston and the Jets in weeks 15 and 16. So very much liking the run that whoever is that dominant running back can get there. And it's going to be one of those that'd be very interesting to see how that plays out. Let's go ahead and move on over to the least favorable schedule. Who are you potentially staying away from because of some of the scheduling things that you're seeing?
I'll go again here. And it is, for me, the least favorable schedule is Baltimore. And so for that, Lamar Jackson in that wide receiver room, which – there's still the jury's still out on that connection. But what they get early on, they get the Chiefs in week 2. That's going to be a tough one. They do have some what you would call maybe some easier games with the Lions and Broncos in week 3 and 4. But then you're going to face defenses like the Colts. The Chargers should be improved on defense. Your division games will be tough. They do have the bye in week 8, which I think is probably the best thing that they have going for them in this schedule because kind of splits the season in half there. But you get games against the Vikings, should have a better secondary if they can remain healthy at that time in the season. Mike Zimmer is known for having a decent secondary. He had to play dudes literally coming off the street last year. So if they can have some consistency, that's not going to be a cakewalk. You get the Dolphins after that, the Bears, the Browns, the Steelers. I mean, we're talking about the pretty good defenses here that they're going to have to go up against. Perhaps the biggest saving grace for this Baltimore team and people who have, Baltimore players. They play the Steelers for the second time in week 18, which should be at the end of or post fantasy football leagues. So that is nice. But in the lead up to that game, you get the Packers, the Bengals again, and the Rams. So those are tough defensive matchups there for Baltimore players in the playoffs, in your fantasy playoffs. And so for that reason, I say that is a very difficult schedule on top of, what will Lamar Jackson be this year in that receiving room. That for me is the least favorable schedule.
So my least favorite schedule, as NFL rosters are currently constructed, is the Chicago Bears. Their schedule is brutal. Specifically, they open up in LA against the Rams, so that's going to be tough enough. But then specifically in weeks 5 through 11, they have to go across country and play the Raiders in Vegas. Then they're home against the Packers. Then they're at Tampa Bay. And then they're home against the Niners. And then they're at Pittsburgh to play the Steelers. And then they finally have a bye to catch their breath, only to host the Baltimore Ravens right after their bye week. Guys, that is a defensive prowess. Maybe not as much with the Packers, but that's the Aaron Rodgers effect, right? As the rosters are currently constructed in the NFL, that's a brutal schedule, guys. And that's not only for the NFL season, but in the heart of the fantasy football season. That's 6 weeks that your guys, whether it's Montgomery, whether you like Fields and you think you're going to take a flyer on him, seeing this schedule makes my heart hurt for Allen Robinson because I love me some A-Rob, but man, I don't like this schedule for him in the middle of the season. That's going to be a little tough. So for me, it's the Bears. I just find that middle of the season when you're trying to jockey for position and get yourself in the right place for a playoff push and to kind of assert yourself, if the Bears aren't careful here, guys, they're going to be out of it after week 11, and they still have 6 weeks left to play and just try and hold it together to get to the offseason. Like, this is going to be a tough pill for this team to swallow.
Oh, yeah, those Bears. For me personally, I'm going with the Panthers. And especially like the front half of the season for them, it's decent. They had definitely some favorable matchups, you could say. But once they get to that back half of the season, I'm real nervous to be owning guys like McCaffrey, Moore, Anderson. Like, I don't know if I really want to go out there and draft guys like this, especially early on, because look what they have. They have the Cardinals. Okay matchup, but still pretty tough. Then they have Washington, which was tough last year. They have Miami, that was tough last year. Then they get a bye. They play Atlanta. That should be good. Then they have Buffalo, Tampa, New Orleans, Tampa again. That's just a lot of tough matchups at the end of the season there. And again, we all like the matchups with Moore and McCaffrey always, but does Sam Darnold really step up and take that next level? I don't know still. And it's kind of nerve-wracking to have to think about, hey, like, can Sam Darnold really do this? We really have never seen Sam Darnold really show up before, especially in tough matchups. So those end of the season guys, especially that back half there, I'm kind of nervous about going after guys like this, even though I do like DJ Moore and Christian McCaffrey. If McCaffrey, you're taking 101, but like guys like DJ Moore right now and Robbie Anderson, I'm a little concerned taking them guys because of how that back half of the season is going to go for them. You're mute, Derek.
Dang it, we almost sat to an entire episode, and I had to blow it in the home stretch.
That's one.
Home stretch, that's one. Very proud of us, though, for making it an hour and 45 before we got one. So congratulations, guys. All righty, so mine is going to be along the same kind of lines as far as a running back that has always been very good towards the back half of the season and tends to get stronger and better as the season wears through, but I am not liking the Tennessee Titans schedule, especially in weeks 15, 16, 17, as you start looking at that. So Derrick Henry is going up against a tough Pittsburgh defense, followed that up with what should be a tough, now healthy San Francisco defense on a very short week. They go from the Sunday game to that Thursday night game for week 16, and then following that up against the team we just talked about with the Dolphins, who showed some promise last year with the defense. So there's a few things out there that had me questioning where I was kind of at with Derrick Henry, but looking at this playoff schedule, it doesn't leave me warm and fuzzy looking at that last bit of that season. So any other thoughts on the playoff schedule or the schedule as a whole?
It's like the worst kept secret, right? Like when they were revealing the schedule, it was like, we're just going to tease you with all 17 games for every team. That's the tease that you're going to get. But make sure to watch later tonight when we tell you everything we told you throughout the course of the day.
Yeah.
Well, it's just how they fall, right? Like at the end of the season, you know exactly who your particular team or any team is going to face the next year. It's just a matter of home road splits, how they fall in the schedule. Like, and to your point, people blow up about it, like, oh my gosh, the schedule's released. And well, the dates have been released, guys. We've known the opponents for 4 months now. Like, seriously, since December, we've known the opponents. And now that we're in May, it's, again, so NFL starved that they, piss on a cat and
they make a primetime production out of the schedule being released.
Yes.
All righty. Well, guys, any final thoughts for the listeners?
Draft, and more draft. If you have any questions, hit us up and let us know. This is my favorite time of year. All the rookie drafts, the dynasty drafts, the redrafts, the best ball drafts. Love it, love it, love it. So feel free to hit us up if you have any questions and you're doing a slow draft, and we'll help you out best we can.
Absolutely. Well, and Steve, we want to thank you for coming on and being our guest tonight. Always a pleasure having you on. Before we get out of here, why don't you make sure that you plug your socials again? Let the listeners know where they can connect with you.
Yeah, absolutely, guys, and I appreciate you guys letting me come on tonight. It's definitely a late night for me. I'm not a late sleeper, but I powered through for you guys. This was a fun episode to talk about, obviously, the Dolphins and the NFL schedule. So, and guys, as always, you can follow the fantasy coaches over on Twitter at Coaches Fantasy. And if you guys ever want to reach out to me about any fantasy questions or just talk football, you can reach out to me on Twitter at Coach Stephen P.
Very cool. Alrighty, guys. I do believe that that's going to wrap up yet another episode of the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. Make sure that you're subscribing on the YouTube channel, the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast YouTube channel. You can find us on the socials at Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitch at Good Old Boys FF. We've got the website over there for you, goodoldboysff.com. Make sure you're checking that one out there as well. For Kevin and Alex, I'm Derek. Have a good one. Be safe.